All right, let's dive into a huge idea, one that pretty much defines the world we live in: sovereignty. It's this invisible force that draws our borders, decides who's in charge, and basically sets the rules for how every country on the planet deals with each other. So, let's unpack what it really means.
And we're going to tackle this by asking one really central question. What actually gives a country its ultimate authority? And maybe even more important for our world today, when can that authority be challenged? This question, it's right at the heart of so many conflicts and debates we see playing out right now.
To really get a handle on what sovereignty means today, we have to go back in time. This whole idea didn't just appear out of thin air. It was actually forged in the fire of European history. So let's see how it all got started.
So, the story of modern sovereignty really kicks off in one pivotal year, 1648, the Peace of Westphalia. This treaty ended decades of brutal religious wars in Europe, and it did it by establishing a brand new revolutionary idea: non-interference. Basically, rulers agreed to respect each other's borders and stay out of each other's business. This was a game changer. It weakened the power of the church and really gave birth to the idea of the modern nation-state.
But hold on, who actually held that sovereign power? Well, at first, it was simple: the king or queen. We call that dynastic sovereignty. But over the next couple of centuries, a massive shift started happening. A new idea called popular sovereignty bubbled up, and it argued that the ultimate power doesn't rest with a monarch, but with the people themselves. They're the ones who grant authority to a government to act for them.
Now here's the thing, this European idea didn't just stay in Europe. As colonial empires grew, they basically stamped this model onto the rest of the world. As one historian put it, they, quote, drew lines upon maps, thus delineating nations where none had existed. I mean, just think about that. This act of redrawing the world created new countries out of whole cloth, often dividing communities and creating problems that we are absolutely still dealing with today.
Okay, so let's fast forward to today. All that history created a kind of rule book for the modern world, a framework for how all these different sovereign nations are supposed to interact and, well, get along on the world stage.
And right at the very heart of international law and organizations like the UN is this really powerful principle: sovereign equality. Now, in theory, what this means is that it doesn't matter if a country is huge or tiny, rich or poor. On the world stage, its legal standing is exactly the same as everybody else's.
So what does that actually mean in practice? Well, it breaks down into a few key points. States are legally equal, they have full rights over their own turf, and they have to respect each other. A country's borders are supposed to be untouchable, and they're free to pick whatever political or economic system they want. But look at that last point. States also have to fulfill their international obligations. This is so important because it shows us that sovereignty isn't a total free-for-all.
So, what officially makes a government sovereign? Well, it all comes down to one word: recognition. When other countries look at a nation and acknowledge that, yep, there's a central government in charge there, that government gets its sovereign status. And here's a really critical point. This recognition has nothing to do with whether other countries like or approve of that government. A brutal dictatorship in the eyes of international law is no less sovereign than a vibrant democracy.
But of course, the real world is always way more messy, isn't it? That nice, clean idea of every nation being the master of its own destiny, well, it's under some serious strain these days. You could say the foundation is starting to show some pretty deep cracks.
A political scientist named Robert Jackson came up with a brilliant way to think about this. He talked about two types of sovereignty. First, there's negative sovereignty. Think of this like a do not disturb sign on your country's front door. It's the legal right to be left alone. But then there's positive sovereignty, and that's about what's actually happening inside the house. Does the government have the real power, the actual ability to govern effectively and take care of its people?
And this gap between the two can be massive. After colonialism ended, lots of new countries got that negative sovereignty. They were officially independent. But many really struggled to achieve positive sovereignty. So for them, the whole debate isn't about their power slipping away. It's about whether they ever really had a firm grip on it in the first place.
And this leads us to one of the most painful, most difficult ethical questions of our time. If sovereignty means everyone minds their own business, what is the world supposed to do when a government turns on its own people, or when it's simply collapsed and can't protect them? This is the very core of the whole debate around humanitarian intervention.
And the pressures just keep piling up from all sides. I mean, think about it. You've got globalization, where huge corporations can be as powerful as some countries. You have international treaties, where nations agree to give up a little bit of their sovereignty to tackle big problems like climate change. Then you have the growing force of international human rights law, and the tragic reality of failed states. All of this is challenging and reshaping what sovereignty even means in the 21st century.
So, where does all this leave us? Well, it's pretty clear that sovereignty isn't some simple, unchanging fact of life anymore. It's a living, breathing concept, and its very meaning is being argued over and redefined as we speak.
There's actually a great analogy for this whole shift. It used to be said that sovereignty was kind of like marriage. It was just a legal status, and it didn't really matter what the relationship was like between the two partners, in this case the government and its people. Whether it was a happy, healthy relationship or a terrible, abusive one, the legal status of married didn't change.
But today, that's really changing. The nature of that relationship inside the country actually matters to the rest of the world. Things like good governance, protecting human rights, these are now part of the international conversation. Sovereignty just isn't seen as this simple, fixed status anymore.
And that leaves us with this final, really provocative question to think about. Is sovereignty an absolute shield, a legal status that has to be defended no matter what's happening inside a country's borders? Or is it more like a relationship, a kind of agreement between a government and its people that, if it's broken, can be questioned or maybe even ended by the rest of the world? The answer to that question is going to shape the future for all of us.